You are listening to Fantasy Filmball with Matt and Dylan, and on this show, we turn movies into sports and look at all the Oscar prospects and their fantasy value.
I believe that this is going to win Best Picture, and here's why.
I mean, Denis Villeneuve got all the nominations he needed for Dune and still missed out on the Best Director slot.
Don't let me get my hopes up. The Academy has disappointed me too many times.
Thank you to the Academy. Thank you to all of you in this room.
I can't remember the last time I walked out of a movie theater on such a high.
No matter how certain it seems, anything can happen on nominations morning.
Never count the Golden Globes for just doing something off the walls and bonkers.
It's the kind of movie that reminds me of why I fell in love with movies.
And the Oscar goes to...
Welcome into episode 18 of Fantasy Filmball. My name is Matt. And this is Arnaud. How's it going, Arnaud?
It's weird. I feel like something's not right. Somebody's missing, right?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'm not really noticing anything different. You run the show with me every week, right? This is Fantasy Filmball.
I'm pretty sure I've been here every single time. I'm pretty sure I've been repping Elvis and Avatar this whole time.
Ah, yeah. Okay, so for everyone listening, Dylan is gone. He's enjoying Halloween Horror Nights at Universal Studios, which I am extremely jealous of. But in the meantime, we've got Arnaud here, and welcome back to the show, Arnaud. In previous weeks, we have had Arnaud on doing the draft. Arnaud is one of our Filmball players in the league. And also, Arnaud is the co-creator of the game. And just so that everyone can reacquaint themselves with Arnaud, tell us a little bit about yourself, Arnaud.
Yes, so my name's Arnaud, as we've said a couple times. Matt and I have been co-creating.
Yeah, it's Arnaud, just in case anyone forgets. It is Arnaud.
Yes, Arnaud, not Dyl, Arnaud. And we've played Fantasy Filmball for the past 5 years, and this is, it's a game that I feel like Matt and I, we're not just knowledgeable about it, we're, I would say, quite good at playing it, not to be too arrogant about it, and I feel very confident about our teams. I think I have potentially 3 Best Picture nominees on my team this year. I think I potentially have the Best Picture winner. So I don't want to talk too much smack, but I think I got a pretty good team here. But anyways, I think one of the things I've always been pretty proud of personally is my interest / knowledge into the international film category and just the specialized categories in general, like documentary and animation, because those tend to be games onto themselves. And I think that if we are to talk about them at length, I can bring a lot of details about them and help you out on your strategy.
Yeah, so when Dylan and I started up this show, Arnaud called me and basically said, if you ever do an episode about the international category or documentary, I'm your guy. Bring me on to talk about it. So now we're here. And this episode, as you may have gleaned from the title, is it's your cheat sheet to the international film category, which is a category that a lot of people don't really know a whole lot about, which is, again, why we've got Arnaud here, who is the expert, who studies this, who has gone through all of the films this year, has seen quite a few of them, and is here to give us a little bit more insight on the category. But before we get too far into that, and before Arnaud tells us his tier list of the international film contenders for this year, we have to start it up the way that we always do on this show, which is with a little question of the week. Now, in the past few years, we've had a lot of international films break through into the Best Picture race. In the expanded era, there's been a lot more room, which has led to stuff like Drive My Car, or Parasite, or Roma, which I've got on my shelf today. And so I guess the question this week is, what's an international film that didn't make it into Best Picture that you wish did?
Well, if you had asked me this question just a year ago, I think I would have said Drive My Car, at least in the expanded ballot era. And I still have trouble believing that Drive My Car actually went beyond the international film category, went beyond a screenplay nomination, which seemed like its best bet, but even got a director and a picture nomination. That to me is still crazy, that a 3-hour, methodically kind of slow film about grief really just went all the way there through sheer love and passion. That being said, though, Drive My Car did end up getting a Best Picture nomination. Therefore, I think my answer would be, in the same year as Parasite, Portrait of a Lady on Fire. This is a film that is very, very dear to me, that I think is one of the masterpieces of the 21st century, and it's a bit of an easy answer because there is a huge fandom around this film, and I'm definitely part of that. But to me, this is the film that feels like in the next few years is going to be seen as one of the all-time classics. And it feels a bit strange that that wasn't recognized anywhere at the Oscars.
Okay, I've got a lot of international films that I would have loved to see get into Best Picture, but a lot of them are completely unrealistic. Like, the first thing that comes to mind for me would be something Hayao Miyazaki, because I'm such a huge Hayao Miyazaki fan. I have cats that are named Totoro and Calcifer. So I would love to see that happen, but that's not feasible. That's not something that ever would happen. So if I had to be realistic, I guess I would go with Pan's Labyrinth, because Pan's Labyrinth was a film that broke through to the Oscars. It got multiple nominations. It got multiple wins. That's a film that did exceptionally well at the Oscars, but for some reason was left out of Best Picture, and that's mystifying to me. And Pan's Labyrinth was one of the films that expanded my young mind into being open to foreign language films. I think I was probably 12 years old when I first watched Pan's Labyrinth, and it allowed me to dip my toes into international cinema. I'd say the first one that did was Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, which did get a Best Picture nomination. But that film, I think when I was a kid, I watched Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, but I watched it with the dubbed version, so I wouldn't count that. But Pan's Labyrinth was my introduction to international film. And it is wild to me that it got so many Oscar nominations, but not Best Picture. And so many wins, too. Like, I think it won cinematography, production design, maybe makeup. I know it won multiple, but I am not remembering clearly what it did.
Yeah, it was a big contender below the line for sure, and it's really cool that you mentioned this. And seeing as we've talked a lot these past few years about Parasite being this entry level foreign language film, international film, to some people coming out of that film saying that was their first Asian film they've ever seen and wanting to see more. And it's fun. It's cool to see that this has been the case for many years, where Pan's Labyrinth was one of those films that really helped people, even if the film is fantastic, of course, be that kind of entry level film into a much deeper world.
As Bong Joon-ho said, to overcome the 1-inch barrier that is subtitles. But anyways, enough about our own experiences with international films, with foreign language films. This is our time for this week's Filmball update. And Arnaud, you came into this episode feeling pretty braggadocio about your team. So just in general, you're feeling pretty good about your team. You're feeling good about your Best Picture contenders. How are you feeling below the line with your films? Are you feeling like you've got a strong team all the way through?
For the record, I'm not convinced I'm winning. I think I have a solid team, and I think I have the potential to have 3 Best Picture nominees, but I'm not convinced that there is, the game is all said and done. We're knowledgeable enough. We've played this game enough to know that at this point in time, there's still a lot of things that can happen. A lot of developments can still happen. And below the line, I feel pretty good, but obviously there are a lot of things that could have been better. I feel still quite good about All the Beauty and the Bloodshed being my 4th pick. Strange World, I'm feeling less and less confident about it being a potential steal for the animation category, as much as there's Disney keeps winning every single time. Pinocchio just seems more and more undeniable every time we get any news about it. We are still waiting for actual reactions, which should be coming maybe next week. But and then I have The Menu, which again I'm quite happy about. My Policeman, which I think is not even breaking 100 points now, but it is what it is. And but I feel pretty good about my waiver pick.
So with our waivers, we talked about it a little bit last week, but we are only 3 films in. So just an update for everyone. We've completed the October waiver draft where we each add 1 new film to our team. So just a recap of last week, the first waiver pick was Saint Omer, which went to Austin. Then Senior, which is the Robert Downey Sr. documentary, that went to Dylan second. Third was Emancipation, which I took. And then after that, Brother Bro took the Navalny documentary. Arnaud, you took Armageddon Time, the James Gray film, and Film Drunk brought us home with The Bad Guys. So you picked Armageddon Time. Tell us a little bit about that pick. What was your reasoning for the pick? Do you see much potential for it? Where do you see the points coming from? How are you feeling about it?
I feel pretty good about it. This is one I just barely didn't pick during the original draft. I think I did mention it on the podcast, actually. It was one of the titles I was kind of like wondering what I should pick as my last pick. I ended up going with Nanny. Armageddon Time, though, is one that I don't think has a particularly high ceiling, but I think that it has potential, if only with indie spirits and a few critics groups, when it comes to some acting categories, maybe even like the director category in some cases. And it's not a film I think is going to be one of the most impactful films of the year. I don't think it's a film that's going to make a huge impact on award season as a whole, but it is a film with a very big profile. It is a film with prestige, and it is a film that Focus is clearly placing very heavily in late October limited and then going wide in November, which is a very good placement.
Very interesting. I know a lot of other leagues took Armageddon Time a little bit earlier, so we are one of the only leagues that has it in the waiver drafts. Now, with Armageddon Time, I do see a potential for Anthony Hopkins to play spoiler all season long. I think there's even a chance that he is the Ben Affleck in the Tender Bar of this year, where he just pops up randomly every once in a while, and the entire way to the Oscars we're going, could that happen? Could he just wedge in there? And in the other picks, so Brother Bro picked Navalny, of course, and with Navalny, that is another film that most other drafts had picked in their actual game, while for us, we picked it in the late rounds. And I think generally that's because even though this is one of the biggest docs of the year, it premiered so early that I don't think a lot of us have a lot of faith that this gets into the documentary category because it's kind of peaked a while ago. But who knows? Maybe it builds up steam again. But Arnaud, you tallied up across all of the different leagues of this game what the most common waiver pick was. And I'm going to be honest, I was actually a little bit surprised to see what the most common picked film was. The most picked film was Saint Omer. 5 different teams picked this film for a waiver pick, which I guess makes sense. What do you think about that?
I think it's a bad pick. I'm going to be real. I mean, it's you're definitely guaranteed some Metacritic points and the prize from Venice, and that guarantees you a little bit over 100 points. And I think it's basically going to cap out there. If you want, really? I think this would be a good waiver pick later down the line, because right now I think you're just guaranteeing yourself a few points and not taking much of a risk on something that could get you more. Saint Omer, people really want to believe that this is France's submission to the Academy Awards. France is an important country for cinema. We know France last year from Titan and Happening, and even before then from Portrait of a Lady on Fire and Les Mis, among other films. People want to believe that because France selected this, because this was one of the breakout titles at Venice, this is the kind of wrench that was thrown into the international category, and this is going to change everything. It's not. This could go the way of Memoria. To be frank, it gets a pretty good prize at a major film festival, gets a really high Metacritic score, and gets virtually nothing else.
That actually makes sense. I actually would compare it a lot more to Happening, which was a film that did not get Oscar nominated, in that case, it was because it could not get Oscar nominated. But in the case of Saint-Omer, it's just not going to get Oscar nominated because it's not going to connect with the committee in that way. I think that it has a shot at getting some BAFTA points. I think it's going to get some critics' love. I do think that it's going to fare a little bit better than Memoria did. But we'll have to see. I would love for it to kind of just flop, because this was a film that did absolutely nothing for me. I think that the enticing factor there was the fact that it has a 95 on Metacritic right now. So that, I guess it makes sense to me why it was picked there.
You know what does make sense, though, is My Father's Dragon getting picked in parts due to its London premiere at the BFI Film Festival. And we've started to get reactions, strong reactions, and people are catching on and thinking, is this one of those cartoon saloon films that, they've been very consistent lately as to getting their films into the animated film category?
And not just lately, they've always been consistent. I mean, since 2009, The Secret of Kells, every film that Cartoon Saloon has put out has been nominated for Best Animated Feature. I know that this also impacts the category. I guess it wasn't really ever a real contender, but I do want to talk about the disqualification of Apollo 10.5 from the animated film category, which was a bit surprising, because that's basically the Academy saying that rotoscoped films are not animated films.
It's a little disappointing to see that a film like that can't compete. Not that it would get nominated in the first place, but it's also interesting in the development of this race, because it implies that if this film, which is, entirely drawn from start to finish, or entirely, animated from start to finish, a film that is only partially animated through some sort of stop motion, like Marcel the Shell with Shoes On, might not be eligible at all.
Yeah, you read my mind. That's what I was going to say, is that I think in the next week or 2 weeks, we're going to hear that Marcel the Shell has been ruled ineligible for the Oscar, which is not going to be a huge thing into the race. In other news outside of a film that wasn't getting nominated anyways, getting disqualified, we have another London Film Festival premiere, which was Matilda, which was my 10th pick on my team. And when I picked that 10th, people kind of made fun of me a little bit. So I just want to be able to say right now, I feel very vindicated, because Matilda is getting very good reviews. It has a lot of people who absolutely just adore this film. And it's getting the type of love, maybe not for Oscars, although I think that it's possible for something like makeup, for something like song, perhaps even costumes. But this seems like a shoo-in for the Golden Globes.
I think you did make a really great last pick there, one that was a bit of a risk, but it seems to be paying off. I think this is a Netflix film, if I'm not mistaken. And I think this is, Netflix always has a huge lineup. For the past 5 years, they've always brought a very big lineup. They have some very, very buzzy titles like Don't Look Up, like Roma, like Power to the Dog. They also have some titles that are maybe, that do well in certain categories, like The Lost Daughter, Tick, Tick, Boom. And then they have titles that are gonna do well in very niche and specific places, specific categories. I think Matilda is that, at least when it comes to, like you said, the Golden Globes. And then a few maybe niche below the line categories, and it's going to rack up a decent amount of points.
We're getting into our segment for today, which is, of course, what you're here for, the international feature, submissions, tier list. We are here to have Arnaud tell us what we should be looking out for, what should be on the horizon, what could be a shortlist, what could be a nominee, and what might the winner be. So, Arnaud, take it away.
Well, like you said earlier on the program, Matt, a lot of people try to figure this category out and aren't necessarily aware of the films that are competing within it, because they're not necessarily the films that are getting the big box office bucks, or that are necessarily successful in your home country, whatever that may be. So this is a category that takes a lot of research. This is a category that takes a lot of curiosity. And the people I think who do best in this category are those who are really trying to understand people's sensibilities, who understand how countries kind of work, how their industry work, and what kind of films are likely to push forward, and all these kinds of things. Usually, in most awards bodies, the international film category, whatever the title of that category is very simple. It's just like any other category. Whatever people want to nominate, whatever their favorite film is, gets nominated. Eventually people vote, that film wins. The Oscars do it differently. They do it through submissions. They ask every country in the world to submit one film, not two, not three, one single film. And that system has led to some controversy. This is how things are done, whether we like it or not. This also leads to a lot of interesting developments as to, because these submissions are outsourced to each country that have to form a committee and decide within themselves what is the best film to submit for the Oscars. And of course, without going into too much detail, a lot of countries are politically motivated or would rather silence their distance, even if their distance made the best film from their country that year. And then lots of other factors can come into play. I'm not going to go into too many details about that, but that is something you have to know when thinking and strategizing over this category when it comes to the Oscars.
Arnaud, you keep a list year-round where you make predictions, not just of what's getting nominated, but also of what each country is going to submit for the Oscars, which I find incredibly interesting. But it also leads to a lot of people, when they try to predict this category, they predict whatever the biggest international films are out there. And that leads to, I know you and I have definitely had quite a few laughs this year over the fact that, like, seemingly every single one of the biggest predictors who, like, the ones who work for the big magazines like Variety or IndieWire have been predicting something like RRR to be nominated, when you and I both know that India was never going to select or submit that film.
Yes, absolutely. And we're gonna take a look into the submissions this year. But just as a heads up, films that had a very high profile this year in the international film categories, but that were not submitted for the Oscars include, like you said, RRR from India, which I think is the best film of the year so far. So if you haven't watched that, go check it out. It's on Netflix. It is one of the most fun films you'll ever see. Frankly, we'll talk about it more. Broker, which is the new Hirokazu Koreeda film that he filmed this time in South Korea with Song Kang-ho, which we all know from Parasite. The Eight Mountains, which is a Belgian-Italian co-production that is adapted from a novel, seems like a very kind of charming, endearing film that unfortunately was not selected by Italy. The Beasts from Spain, Godland. I'm going to go through these a little bit quicker, but if you're curious about them, look them up. Godland from Iceland, RMN from Romania. Official Competition from Spain or Argentina, one of the two. Layla's Brothers from Iran. No Bears, also from Iran. I'm going to stop there, but those are some of the most high-profile titles that are not going to be competing this year. So if those titles rang the bell and you're like, oh, I really like that film, too bad. It's done. It's dead in the water for the Oscars, at least. And right now, so we're at a point where all the countries that were allowed to submit a film have submitted one. The deadline was in October, was the 3rd of October. That being said, the Academy has still not revealed or released the list of all the films that were submitted to them, and it's been up to the countries to, like, through a press release, let us know what films they have chosen. Therefore, we might be missing a few titles. But most of them, or at least I would say the big ones, the most important ones, have been revealed. We have 83 recorded submissions this year. It doesn't mean that all of them will be accepted. There are a few rare cases where a film doesn't have enough of the foreign language and too much English. So we're still waiting on countries like Cambodia, the UK, Australia, South Africa. It's down from 92 last year at the moment. This might go back up when we have the full list, but we are a little bit down this year. And part of that is because we've seen a recent trend through countries like Nigeria and Egypt that are straight up, even though they have a film that can contend for awards, deciding not to send anything to the Oscars, which is a very interesting development in this race, at least for those who care about this race, because historically, whether you have the worst film, if you have the worst film of all time, you're still going to submit it because you never know. And this time we're seeing countries that are deciding not to submit, presumably because they are not confident in the films they have. Or perhaps in Nigeria's case, they are frustrated with the Academy that they aren't able to submit films in their own English dialect. For better or for worse, those are the rules. We didn't make them, but we have to abide by them if we want to play the game for this category. So right now we have, like I said, 83 films that were submitted, at least that we know of. There's a short list of 15 films. Then there's 5 films nominated and 1 that wins. And there's a lot of those films, of those 83 films, that are going to go directly on the chopping block. That are clearly not even worth mentioning. And so I've created a tier list here, and this is going to be fun. It's going to be me telling you what are the films you should be considering, what films are absolutely not worth your time. Through this tier list, I'm going to be speaking it aloud so you can hear the titles if you're listening to this on podcast form, but if you're listening to this on YouTube, you will be seeing the actual tier list, which is going to be fun.
I have not seen Arnaud's tier list yet, so I'm going to be reacting live to it, and we're going to be discussing as we go, because I have no idea what you've put where. I might disagree very strongly with you at some points, or maybe we'll just kind of fall in line, or maybe I won't even heard of some of these films.
Yeah, well, I've got about 45 films on the list here, so there's definitely a lot of these that most people are never even going to hear beyond this episode. But we'll talk about the most obvious ones, the one that seem like there's more potential in them. But the ones that really do not have potential are the ones in the F tier. So I have A Piece of Sky from Switzerland, Kalev, which is a basketball kind of drama from Estonia, Domingo in the Mist from Costa Rica, and the legendary, the new Wakaliwood, but in Kenya, Terror Storm.
Oh my god. I watched the Terror Storm trailer today in preparation for this moment because I knew we were going to talk about Terror Storm. So Terror Storm, it's a 3D animated film. The animation quality looks like something straight out of like a PS2 game. It looks so awful. The characters' faces don't move. Like their mouth moves, but like their eyes don't move. It's just like the most horrifying Polar Express, like uncanny valley shit that you could imagine. But despite
this
that, I'm going to be honest.
Polar Express type of animation done with the level of quality of Food Fight.
Yeah, but I'm going to be honest. I actually I kind of think it looks very fun, and I do really want to see it because like it looks imaginative in a very fun way. That, I want to see this film. I've seen probably about 20 or just over 20 of the submissions so far. And Domingo in the Mist was a film that I saw. I thought it was a really, really good film. It's very slow, a little bit difficult, and just it's not the Oscars type of thing. So, yeah, I'd agree with your assessment here.
Yeah, that's the thing, is that like some of these films, even in the F tier, might be really good. But this tier list is not about quality or whether or not, this will appeal to audiences or not. This is about whether or not this will have Oscar success. So Domingo in the Mist, I think we can agree, as good as that film may be, it is slow, it is artistic, it is, meditative in a lot of ways. I haven't actually seen it, but this is the kind of things I kind of glean from the reactions. Basically, it's not an Oscars thing. Good as
you're correct. You're correct about this.
So F tier are things you should absolutely not touch. Sorry, but Terror Storm is not making it to Best Picture or Best Visual Effects. E tier is almost certainly dead on arrival. And in E tier, I have Magnetic Fields from Greece, Mediterranean Fever from Palestine, Cinema Sabaya from Israel, Memory Box from Lebanon, Immaculate from Romania, The Box from Venezuela, and Eternal Spring from Canada. Lots to talk about here. Immaculate is the Romanian submission, which surprised all of us because we all thought RMN would be the obvious and probably more fruitful submission here. And if RMN had been submitted, I would definitely have placed it higher. Cinema Sabaya is one I've seen. I think it's quite good, but it's nothing exceptional. I don't think Israel had a particularly strong crop of films this year. But Eternal Spring is one I would like to talk about because this is a Canadian Mandarin language documentary animation live action hybrid film. Ultimately, this is clearly Canada seeing the success of Flea and trying to profit off of that, even though this is nowhere near the quality of Flea. And the reason why I wanted to talk about it a little bit is that, we as Canadians, we know very well the films that are coming out of our country, and we had some decent contenders this year. I just saw Falcon Lake not long ago. I saw Viking a few weeks back. Those two films are absolutely incredible. They're original. They have heart. They have a voice behind them. They have great performances. I'm not promising they would have gotten shortlisted, but they certainly had a significant better chance and just all around just a better film to represent Canada.
Something interesting here, of course, both of us are Canadian, so speaking about Canada's submission is something we're going to want to do more. But I have seen people talking about Eternal Spring as a potential contender. And this goes back to something I always talk about on this show, which is just because something happened last year or the year before, it doesn't mean it's going to happen again. And because we've had a few years now of documentaries getting nominated in the foreign language category, with Flea last year and before that having Collective and Honeyland, people see it's a documentary that's getting submitted for the Oscar and they go, oh, I'm going to put that in my predictions. Do not put Eternal Spring in your predictions because you're looking for a documentary to get in because it's happened for the past 3 years. It's not guaranteed to happen again. But in the E category, the other film that I want to briefly talk about is Venezuela's selection, The Box, which is actually very interesting because this film was shortlisted by Mexico to be their submission. It was ultimately not their submission because they chose a film by a very big filmmaker, which we'll talk about later, I assume. When The Box played at Venice, they marketed it as, this is Mexico's film at Venice. And it's been Mexico all along. And apparently the only Venezuelan thing about this film is the director. And so there's a bit of controversy there, especially being that this film was shortlisted by Mexico and eventually selected by Venezuela. It's not getting in, but I can see why people in Venezuela would be pissed off about this film being selected when there are so many Venezuelan films that were passed over for this. But anyways, let's move on to the next category, the D tier.
The D tier for me are films that are very unlikely to get Oscar success, but you never know. So my D tier here has Utama from Bolivia, which is the big winner at this year's Sundance Film Festival in the World Cinema Dramatic category. On the Job, The Missing 8 from the Philippines?
Yes, the Philippines.
Hawa from Bangladesh. Neri Sedap from Indonesia, Our Brothers from Algeria, Victim from the Czech Republic. I'm going to mess up somewhere. I know it already. Under the Fig Tree from Tunisia, The Happiest Man in the World, which I hear is great, from North Macedonia, and the Last Film Show from India.
And you skipped one, Nostalgia from Italy.
Oh yes, sorry, Nostalgia from Italy.
Yeah. I would agree with this category. I think something that I felt is that E and F kind of feel interchangeable, but I definitely feel like D is a step up from that.
Nostalgia is definitely, I think we would agree, an oopsie, especially since Italy could have chosen The Eight Mountains, which I mentioned earlier, a film that won the Jury Prize at Cannes, that has recognizable actors that have worked in Hollywood films, and the director of Beautiful Boy and The Broken Circle Breakdown. This, I'm not saying it was guaranteed to get a nomination or anything like that, but just that package alone, the prestige of it, the reviews that have been coming out about it, I have trouble understanding why Italy would think that nostalgia would yield better success.
Yeah, that's confusing to me as well. I mean, nostalgia, even over some of the stuff that played Venice, is a weird choice to me.
Yeah, I'm just as confused as you are, but maybe even more confused is India picking Last Film Show. We already knew that India's track record was very strange. The only consistent thing about India's track record is that they're inconsistent. And I suppose that they do tend to pick films that play at least in one somewhat recognizable film festival. RRR is a Telugu language blockbuster. It is, you would think that India would submit like one of their big Bollywood or Tollywood or something else would, Collywood, blockbusters every year, but they actually don't. Their film committee is quite snobbish and tends to pick things, more art house titles or riskier titles, or and usually have a very varied choice between their different languages and regions. They chose an Assamese film like, Assamese language film like Village Rock Stars in 2017, and they chose Jallikattu, a Kerala film, which their language is, I'm blanking on their language, but it's a Keralan film. So from the region of Kerala in the south of India.
Wasn't that it's Malayalam?
Malayalam, thank you so much. It's a Malayalam language film, a very entertaining, chaotic, Mad Max-esque film in many ways, which is a very risky pick, and they picked that over The Disciple, which might have been a safer choice given the executive producer credit from Alfonso Cuarón, etc., etc. This year, India had two standout titles, whether it was a documentary, All That Breeds, which is a Marathi language film, or RRR, which is a Telugu language film. Instead, they went with Last Film Show. I will say, having watched it, and it's the only film I've watched in the D tier here, it is a very good film. It is genuinely, it's not just a Cinema Paradiso ripoff or copy and paste. It does really lean into some of the aspects that makes India's film culture unique. That being said, Last Film Show is not on the same level as RRR. RRR, regardless of what you think of the films, has had an incredible reach outside of its country. India is even the biggest successes in India don't always reach outside the country. It's a film industry that is very much isolated and that works with itself. One of those films you react with, and you don't just stay in your seat and wait for it to be over. And India passed on it, because a lot of times these foreign film commissions are not going to look enough into strategy or look enough into reach. They're just going to look at what do we like here.
We have known all along that RRR was not going to be picked, but I had a little bit more hope going into when the selection was actually revealed, because it's such an undeniable hit that it just seems like India would be stupid not to select the film, because how would they not notice that this is a success in the United States, that this is a film with passion in the United States. But I guess that they missed that. That said, I know that there's a lot of members of the industry, a lot of very powerful people in the industry who are campaigning their asses off to get RRR some recognition elsewhere. Specifically, I think people are really pushing for Natu Natu to be a song nomination, as well as I'm seeing a lot of push for the VFX in it. As well as Best Picture. I don't think Best Picture is happening, but I think the other two categories are very possible. But yeah, what a disappointing pick.
these films that are not selected can still compete. Last year, we had Parallel Mothers not be picked by Spain, but getting 2 nominations, including an above-the-line nomination for Penelope Cruz and a below-the-line nomination for Score. And that's despite Spain not choosing it and therefore it not being able to compete in international. So these are not necessarily death sentences, but of course, it does hinder a little bit of that reach, and it's a little bit unfortunate. Although RRR might be a film that reaches enough, that is being talked about enough that people, even outside of being interested of the international category, still want to give it a watch out of curiosity. And just the accessibility. It became so popular in part because of its accessibility being on Netflix, and that is a huge factor that people. Which has helped the film develop its cult following in the United States and abroad.
Watch for critics groups, because if we start to see a trend that RRR is everywhere and is getting nominations from critics groups, in main categories, that could be a sign of something to come. Additionally, I think that it's pretty safe to say RRR will be nominated and will possibly win the Golden Globes category for international film. Same with the Critics' Choice. It's very likely a contender there. And the BAFTAs. I think all of those will see RRR showing up. And I guess it's yet to be seen, is there enough passion behind this film to bring it into any of those above-the-line categories, especially now that it's been left out. I don't know. I can see a world where it actually happens. But let's get into the next category. Let's go to the C tier.
Yeah.
Again, I still have not really disagreed with you on anything.
Well, the C tier to me are good contenders, but they might just figure on the short list and not get anywhere beyond that. So in the C tier, we have Where the Wind Blows from Hong Kong, starring Tony Leung. World War III from Iran, which won the top prize in the Venice Orizzonti section, which is the subsection of the festival, so a little bit below the main competition. Girl Picture from Finland, Mars One from Brazil, The Kings of the World from Colombia, Muru from New Zealand, War Sailor from Norway, Beautiful Beings from Iceland, Plan 75 from Japan, and The Blue Kaftan from Morocco.
Okay. And then I see that there's something still blacked out there.
Oh, just ignore that.
Just ignore.
Yeah, it's a mistake on my end. My bad.
It's okay. Okay. Yeah. So I guess with this category, what I'd say. So you're saying that these could factor into the short list. That's your prediction.
These could get shortlisted,
but they're not, like, you're not saying they are, but they could be. Okay. So I guess I'll just explain the short list very quickly to any listeners. So essentially, out of these, they're going to vote it down to 15 films. And the way that they do that is very interesting, because it's not like every member of the Academy watches and votes them down. So what they do is they assign about 10 to 15 films to a group of different voters, like a randomized group of people who volunteer for the committee. And then those committee members watch their films, they rate them out of 10, and then the 15 highest ranked films overall are the shortlisted films, which is very interesting because you're basically left at the mercy of chance, because you could be given to a group of Academy members that just don't like your film, even though the majority of the Academy will. So in the past, they used to have this thing called the save, which was that they would put the shortlist through, and then a supervising committee would look at the shortlist and would pinpoint a couple of films that got passed over that should be on the shortlist anyways, which is how some films such as The Great Beauty made it onto the nominations ballot, because that was initially not shortlisted and was saved. That is not in place anymore, so some films can get left out just at the mercy of random picking who gets to see the films. So in that way, I mean, truly anything could get shortlisted just based on chance. But yeah, I think you've got a solid list here of things that have maybe a better chance. I would say I think actually Plan 75 deserves to be in the B tier, Japan's selection.
Fair enough. I know people were annoyed to see Japan choose this one over Broker, although I don't know if Broker would have qualified to be a Japanese film anyways. And Plan 75 seems like I haven't seen it. I'm actually going to be watching it in 2 days, but it seems like a really solid film. I love the concept. It looks very promising. I think the most controversial titles here, not necessarily for like their placement, but for their submission, would be Beautiful Beings from Iceland, which Iceland had another really strong pick with Godland, which was picked up by Janus, and from what I hear is a very beautiful film. But also World War III, which I haven't seen, but this is the Iranian submission. Iran is one of the best countries for making films, frankly. The thing is that Iran will only submit films that they are that they like and that isn't particularly challenging politically. Now, we had contenders this year like No Bears from Jafar Panahi, which we knew was not going to be picked because he was just put in jail recently, once again, if I understand correctly. So that wasn't going to be happening. But also Layla's Brothers, which is a film that was very warmly received at Cannes, won the Frepesci Prize, which is the critics' prize there. There might have been a chance for Beyond the Wall, which is an Iranian film that played in the Venice competition, to be selected, but they went with this other film, World War III, which I hear great things about. But the thing is that it doesn't have nearly the high profile as the other films I mentioned. So even though it might be a great film, it might surprise in the shortlist. Ultimately, I don't see as much potential in this as I would if Iran had gone for something like Layla's Brothers.
I've seen quite a few of the films on this ranking. When I say quite a few, I've seen 3 of them. I've seen The Blue Caftan, I've seen Plan 75, and I've seen Girl Picture. I would agree with The Blue Caftan being in the C tier. I said before Plan 75 could be B tier. I've personally got it in my shortlist of the top 15. And Girl Picture, I think, is an interesting one because, yes, it's totally a C tier, but in the event that this does get shortlisted, it could very easily find its way to a nomination because its aesthetics and its tone is very, very American. It's a coming-of-age movie that feels very similar in many ways to something like Lady Bird. So I think that the tone of this one and just the general vibe of this one could benefit it. I'm not going to bet on that, though, but it's a possibility. I think you're right about it being in the C tier here. And you mentioned earlier as well that we shouldn't really be putting too much stock in Letterboxd ratings, and Mars One has an incredibly high Letterboxd rating from Brazil, because that film Brazil has a very supportive film community on Letterboxd. So basically any film coming out of Brazil will be inflated on Letterboxd. But Mars One does have some very strong reactions, which is a little bit tempting to consider it being a possibility, but it's probably not.
I think out of the coming of age, kind of slightly Sundance-y, quirky films, I won't say quirky as in like it's Me and Earl and the Dying Girl or anything, but like slightly whimsical or imaginative films. I don't know if Mars One will stick out enough. And yeah, like you said, South American letterbox, you gotta look out for that a little bit. There will be really, really high scores, but trust me, once it goes beyond their home country, it's gonna go way back down. And that's the case for one of the films on the B tier, Argentina 1985. But just to be clear on what I see the B tier as, B tier are, to me, strong contenders for a nomination. Although, if anything, they are likely to place in the shortlist. So I have One for the Road from Thailand, Klondike from Ukraine, which, of course, Ukraine being in the news so much this year, I think we have to, regardless of the quality of this film, it's going to be considered perhaps more than a lot of other countries this year. So it's something we have to put in the conversation at the very least. Boy from Heaven from Sweden, Alcaraz from Spain, the Golden Bear winner of this year, Saint-Omer from France, Argentina 1985 from Argentina.
This tier makes a lot of sense to me. Arnaud, you are surprising me. I thought we were going to disagree a lot more, but I am in agreement with all of these. So I've seen almost all of these. No, I've seen 5 out of these. Joyland, the Pakistani film, that is, didn't Malala just join that as an executive producer?
She did, although the film is still looking for a distributor, I believe, which is the only reason, frankly, I don't have it in the A tier.
Because I think I actually did move Joyland into my top 5 this week, which we'll talk about later. But yeah, I think Joyland's not a film that I particularly like. I know that it's a film that a lot of people really love. I found it to be a bit basic, but yeah, I can see this getting a nomination, absolutely. Same with The Quiet Girl. I know that The Quiet Girl, we have talked about quite a lot, that this could be a Lunana-style contender. You've seen The Quiet Girl, though, so what's your take on The Quiet Girl?
Yeah, so The Quiet Girl is a really, really good film. It's a film that really surprised me. As I was starting it, I wasn't necessarily seeing it as like this huge player or anything like that, but as the film kept on going, and I was starting to get enveloped in its beauty, and by the end, I was absolutely sobbing. This is a film that if you're watching from start to finish without being on your phone all the time, you're going to be emotionally impacted by this. You're probably gonna cry. I don't cry all that often in movies, but this is one of them. I think for good reason. To me, I think the things that tend to make me cry the most are like acts, really, really genuine acts of kindness. And there are a few in this film that are just absolutely like heart-melting. And it's a very sweet film. It's a beautiful film. It is a film in a 4:3 aspect ratio. I don't know how many films, I don't have stats on this, I don't know how many films get like into nominations with that aspect ratio. I know Joyland also has that aspect ratio. Quite a few films actually from this lineup have this aspect ratio, and I don't think all of them are getting in. It might have a style that is maybe slightly too artistic or slightly too auteurish to get in ultimately, but if this hits the feels in the right way to voters and more people talk about it. I know Super, which is the boutique label of Neon, has this film under their belt. If they decide to push this one, it could surprise. We'll see. I mean, it really ultimately is whether or not people are touched by this film, despite its aesthetics not being particularly Oscar friendly, I would say is the thing. But you were speaking about Lunana. Lunana is one of those films. Lunana, A Yakin Classroom, the full title, was nominated last year. It is a film from Bhutan. Bhutan had never been shortlisted or nominated before, and they've only submitted maybe 1 or 2 films before that. So that was a huge surprise. It's a film that kind of came out of nowhere, didn't even necessarily play major festivals. I think it played BFI, and that's about it. Mm-hmm. But it's a film that really caught on, and voters started to realize they really enjoyed as they were watching all these films, or all the films on the short list, and people were starting to talk about it. And it's because it's a film with a very, very crowd-pleasing script and a premise that really just works very well for general audiences. A Quiet Girl, I don't know if it's a film that fits that description. And on top of that, we keep on saying on this show, you cannot look at previous years and try to assume that some of these events will be replicated. I don't necessarily know if Lunana is going to be replicated this year, and I don't know if A Quiet Girl is going to be that film, but it certainly has a chance, and I think it's almost certainly going to appear on the shortlist because it's a pretty powerful film.
And the next film you have listed here is Argentina 1985, the Argentinian film, which I wanted to go see today. It's playing at the TIFF Bell Lightbox Theater near me, so I wanted to go, but I did not go. But I've heard great things about this, and I think that it's a very strong contender for a nomination, but it's not yet in my top 5.
You will notice on this tier list, basically what I have on the left is like higher placed than what I have on the right. And I have Argentina 1985 just above Saint Omer, which those are the two kind of legal films from the Venice competition this year. And I think that even though Saint Omer was the film to come back with a very important prize, while Argentina 1985 got a big old goose egg at Venice, I think that ultimately audiences will respond a little bit more to Argentina 1985. Not only that, but this, if Amazon is pushing one film in the international film category, it would be this one. I think this is their highest profile film that they have as a studio.
It's an Amazon film?
It is, yes.
Okay, I was not aware of that.
That's why they released it at the TIFF Bell Lightbox, and it's playing like a few weeks before it comes out on the streaming service.
Oh, well, that decides it for me. I'm not going to TIFF. I'll just wait for it to be on Amazon. I will save a little bit of money. But yeah,
so I think this is the trial film that will resonate more with the general public. It's about an important historical issue. It's about the good guys getting the bad guys, whereas Saint Omer is a more artistic and kind of like gray, nuanced film about. I can already see you sighing. Maybe this is a bit too high in your opinion for this film, although I still want to place it there because people are going to take France seriously to a certain extent. Although, honestly, maybe this is just going to be like Titan last year, where we get the surprise, like, not on the shortlist mention. Who knows?
No, I think Saint Omer will be shortlisted. I have it in my top 10 for a nomination. I don't know. I respect what it's trying to do. I just think that it's very, very dull, very hard to sit through. And yeah, Argentina 1985 is apparently very entertaining. It's captivating. And Saint Omer is purely a critics movie, in my opinion. I mean, I think on Letterboxd it has like a 3.3 out of 5, whereas on Metacritic it has a 95. Now, the reason why I think this is going to get shortlisted is because there's so much of a critics push behind this film. I can see this winning a few trifecta prizes. I can see this doing very well with the Critics' Choice Awards. I can see this getting that sort of buzz behind it, but ultimately I think that it's too dull to make it the distance. And I hope that's true because I have promised someone that if this wins the international feature category, I will eat a shoe. So it better not win because I do not want to taste shoe.
Well, you're rooting against France, and I'm never going to appreciate that.
In the World Cup too. So,
well, that's a whole nother issue. But Alcaraz is the next one on the list here, and that's one I just watched earlier today in theaters, and I'm very happy I did. Although this is one that early in the year we thought was like a shoo-in for a nomination, and now I'm not even confident in making the shortlist, and that's mostly because it is a very interesting and well executed story. It's got a great ensemble. It's got a really strong location. It's got strong themes, but it meanders. It's a slice of life film, and whether or not you're captivated by that it'll depend on whether or not people are captivated by that. I wasn't particularly. I found it quite easy to appreciate in a lot of ways, but I wasn't captivated the whole way. So I don't know if everybody will be feeling that way. So Matt, you've seen Boy from Heaven.
Yes, I have. I've seen Boy from Heaven twice, and I'm a big fan of this film. I think you're right to put it in the B tier. I don't think it will get a nomination. I think even a shortlist is possible for it to miss. But that said, I think Boy from Heaven is one to watch for. It is a very fun movie. It's a very good thriller. It's quite conventional as a thriller. It doesn't do a whole lot that you wouldn't expect it to do. But yeah, I mean, I think this is a very, very interesting film and a captivating thriller. It kept me on the edge of my seat both times I watched it. Is it getting nominated? I would say no. But yeah, and then there's Klondike, the Ukrainian film here, and that's one that I am definitely watching out for a lot closer mostly because Ukraine is so prevalent in the news and so important, and to honor a Ukrainian film would be very, very fitting for the Academy. And often we've seen, not just with submissions, but also with just the nominations in this category, we see political statements happen all the time. We could see the same thing happen with Klondike, where it makes its way into the shortlist, into the nominations, because it is a statement to nominate a film by Ukraine.
I think the film is not as prestigious or as qualitative enough to make it to a nomination. I know some people would disagree with that, but I think the story ultimately is not special enough. The directing is very controlled and assured, but it's not necessarily bringing anything new to the conflict, the way that I would argue some other Ukrainian films did that I've watched. But I mean, Klondike is an impressive film, and if you're interested in learning about Ukrainian cinema, it's definitely a good one to, because I mean, especially since it came out this year and won the directing prize at Sundance and all that. But this is a director we haven't really heard much about because this is her first film, and I don't know if this has. It's also a very small film. It takes place really just on, in a field and in a house, and maybe this will lead to, especially given that there's no like record of what people vote for in the shortlist or in the nomination process. People might just given the fact that it's anonymous, people might just vote for whatever they think is the best film for the shortlist and for the nomination. And I don't know if Klondike will necessarily make it to a nomination. I think it's quite possible for the shortlist, but I'm not even convinced 100% about that. But one I think that could really sneak in there is One for the Road. Speaking of Sundance films that won a prize there, it is a film that has a lot of energy. There's a large part of it that is actually takes place in the United States. So part of it, will feel like home to some people. And it's a film with a lot of energy. It's a film that has very much an American sensibility. And it's a film that I think a lot of voters will feel nostalgia for in a lot of ways. They'll be like, this is how my youth was in a lot of ways. This is how my early relationships were. And ultimately, it gives them a lot of that satisfaction, a lot of that kind of melodramatic energy and flair. And, not everybody is going to love the melodramatic kind of sappy parts of it, but maybe it just has that right sensibility, which is why I have it in there.
Okay, now I'm very curious about your A tier because, again, I have yet to really disagree with you on some of these, and I feel like some of the contenders that are still not on the board are films that I'm very likely going to agree with you that these are the big contenders here.
So right off the bat, I'm going to say I don't have an S tier. S tier to me is reserved for films that are 100% or like clear trailblazers. Films like Roma that are absolutely going, or Parasite, that are absolutely getting into Best Picture and other categories beyond that. This year, I'm not convinced we have a film of that nature. We might, the same way that early in the season last year, we didn't realize that Drive My Car would be that kind of contender. Maybe this is the same situation where one of these films in the A tier is going to be an S tier film, but we're just not realizing yet. But right now, I'm not convinced that any of those are, so my S tier is empty, and I have 6 films in the A tier. I know that only 5 of them can be nominated, but I have 6 films, and those films are Corsage from Austria, and then the 5 films I think are going to get nominated from bottom to top: Bardo from Mexico, Decision to Leave from South Korea, Close from Belgium, Holy Spider from Denmark, and All Quiet on the Western Front from Germany. So, Matt, let's talk about Corsage, which I think is your favorite film of the year.
Oh yeah, I love Corsage, man.
I mean, I know you're a little bit mixed on this film, but I think that just on the package alone, that this has Vicky Creeps, which is at least somewhat recognizable name, giving maybe the performance of her career playing a historical role of a really high caliber, a role that was once played by Romy Schneider. Romy Schneider. I don't know why I said that in French. She's not even French. She's German. It's a film with a very prestigious package. It's a historical biopic. It's got an interesting flair to it that some voters will respond to. I know IFC is not a huge campaigner, but this might be their biggest film this year, the one they try to push the most. Ultimately, I think it just barely doesn't get nominated. But I still am not, despite the how competitive lead actress is, I think Vicky Creeps is definitely at the least in the top 10, maybe 6 or 7.
Okay, first off, I think you should just start saying all, celebrity names in a French accent, like Jennifer Lawrence. But anyways, so for Corsage, I think that you're going to change your tune once you see the film, because I also was like, oh my god, I see the package for this. This could get costume design. This could get actress. It could be like that sort of low-key contender that just sneaks up, gets critics' love, and slides in. And after seeing the film, some of the choices that it makes are so confusing to me. Because the thing that this film does is it goes slightly modern. Just slightly modern. They are filming in locations that are like modern day location. Not modern day, they're old locations, but they've been updated to the modern age. So they're like lit by modern lamp fixtures, or you see like an electrical outlet on the wall, and the entire time you're thinking, wow, the production design team really did not give a shit right here. And despite the fact that this film is all about fashion, a lot of the clothing looks like it's clearly antique stuff, but it doesn't look like it's been like upkept. It doesn't look like it's new stuff that's been made in an antique style. Like, it looks antique. It looks like we're in these spaces, in these places, with these clothes that exist still from the era that this film is set in, but are now being filmed as they are in the modern age. It's a bit of a baffling choice. Like, I can see why they did it, but it's truly aesthetically ugly. And that's why I don't see a lot of promise for this film. I do still have it in my top 10, but I see this as like a Titan type film where it misses the shortlist. I don't see this making it in, and I actually do disagree that this is an A-tier film. I think that this should be B-tier at best.
Well, in my 5th slot here, I have Bardo, False Chronicles of a Handful of Truth. Something we've kind of noticed, it's not always 100% the case, but very, very oftentimes in the international film category at the Oscars, there are going to be 3 European films and 2 non-European films. And right now, I'm waiting for Joyland to get a distributor because I'm thinking of switching it for Bardo. No. I think that I'm waiting to see. I know reactions are slightly more positive for Bardo out of London than they were before, but even then, I'm very, very worried about the reactions for Bardo. Is the love of the industry really enough to carry this film? And even if it does, even if the film is carried and does get nominated alongside All Quiet on the Western Front, can Netflix really campaign 2 films of this caliber in the international film category, or are they going to cancel each other out and let something else win? That's something.
In that case, it would be All Quiet getting snubbed.
You really think so?
I'll give you my argument here. So I still think that Bardo is my number 10 for Best Picture. I do have Bardo in Best Picture. I think that there's a world where Bardo gets nominated for Best Picture off of the passion of a specific group that just loves the shit out of that film. And then it doesn't win international because the majority of people don't like the film. And I think that the Academy's system really benefits films that get a strong, strong reaction out of people. And so I do have Bardo in my top 10, but also we're starting to see where priorities lie for studios. We know at this point that Netflix is putting all their cards, they're not changing up at this point. They're putting all their cards behind Bardo and Glass Onion. After TIFF, we thought they might shift, they might go to All Quiet on the Western Front, they might change their mind and do something different. It's clear at this point that they're not. Bardo is their number one push. They are going to be pushing this one. Despite all of the bad reviews, despite the bad press, despite all of it, Bardo is their push. This is the film that they're taking the most seriously, and so in that event, All Quiet on the Western Front is the better film, yes. Does it have a better chance of winning? Yes. But if one Netflix film makes this category, if Netflix is like, we can only get one in and we have to drop the other one, they're dropping All Quiet like it is hot. And, you know, Bardo is not a film that I'm excited for. I think that the trailer looks like dog shit. But it is undeniable that this is a film made for a very specific, very pretentious branch of the Academy. And they're going to eat this shit up. Now, is it possible that this film still does well in other categories while kind of flopping an international feature? Yes, because there's so many things that go on with like the short list and all of that. But ultimately, this is a film that is designed for the Academy. It's not a film that's going to connect with audiences. I think a lot of people are going to fucking hate this movie, but it's a film that clearly is resonating with filmmakers. And that's why I think you're underrating it at number 5.
Yeah, my placement here has a lot to do with the reception of the film and, some of the reactions to the film. I'm very well aware, that's why I have it in the A tier, that there's a lot of people that love this film, a minority, but still an important minority. And that minority being a lot of industry professionals. A lot of them are going to be Academy voters. Right now, I'm not convinced it's winning. I'm not convinced it has a chance of winning, and that's kind of why I'm putting it here. But I think it's it's still quite possible for a nomination. But I could see something kind of getting switched out for it, depending on how things keep going. Even if Netflix tries to push it as much as they can, if you have a dog shit contender, and you push it as hard as you can, it's not going to change anything. Amazon had a very strong contender with Sound of Metal. They didn't push it incredibly hard, and yet they got a Best Picture nomination. So sometimes you have studios campaigning and doing a good job at that, but sometimes it is the film. We'll see if which category Bardo falls under. Decision to Leave, I know a lot of people really, really strongly believe that this is the international director slot. This is the one that's going to break through. It might even get into Best Picture. South Korea is on their shit. Park Chan-wook is the GOAT. This is the next Parasite. I don't know why. I mean, I kind of see why people would think that. It's not GOAT, guys.
I think that people are biased, and I think that there are a lot of Korean film superfans out there, and people who are specifically superfans of this film whose judgment is being blinded. This is not happening beyond international feature, if that.
I think I haven't actually seen it, but I think it's almost certainly getting nominated, but I wouldn't say it's a lock. But to be fair, I wouldn't actually lock any of these. So, but I do have a bit of confidence in it. I do realize that it's not always audience friendly, but I think it just still has so many ideas of mise-en-scène and direction and just a lot of energy in a lot of places, and just kind of like really takes some really interesting directions. So I feel pretty confident that at least it will be like talked about, and this will be Mubi's big push, not Alcaraz. But Close, I think, has quite a bit of potential, maybe not beyond international, but this is one that a lot of people have been talking about. It's been a little bit absent from the festival circuit. A24 is not particularly known for international films, but this is their chance to show they have the goods. We'll see what that entails, but Close is, audiences have gone pretty crazy for it, even for its controversial aspects. So this to me feels pretty safe.
Yeah, I mean, you said that you wouldn't lock any of these films in, and Close is actually the only film that I would say is a lock in the international category, because it's so Academy friendly in many ways that, like, it's going to make the shortlist, it's going to be nominated, it might not win, but it's definitely a contender to win.
But I think Holy Spider might have a slightly better chance to win. And that's not because Holy Spider
I disagree.
is worthy of a win, but I think the race is a little bit fickle and all over the place this year, to the point that we could see something like that happen, which is why I have it so high here. And also, one of the films for the longest time I thought was On the Outside Looking In, but the more I think about it, the more I think it's just in, and Denmark knows what they're doing. And Utopia, which is kind of a new distributor in town, which is trying to be a bit of like a neon-ish distributor, it's going to be their main push. We don't know how good they're going to be, but maybe if they're able to really prove themselves, they can have this film get nominated. It really is the type of film that should resonate with the Academy. We'll see what happens.
Okay, I'm going to say something that you might disagree with, which is that I don't think distributors matter at all in this category. At all. And I know that, like, you've been speaking a lot about, like, oh, this is Movies push. Can Netflix push 2 films into this? A24 hasn't pushed something in this category. And Utopia, of course, who has really just not proven themselves in an awards capacity at all. But time and time again, every year, we see films that get nominated in this category that don't even have a distributor until nominations morning. For example, Lunana, A Yak in the Classroom last year, got a distributor after it got nominated. The way that the category works is so based on the merit of the films themselves that, I don't think it matters. What do you think about that?
But either way, I think what we can agree on is that All Quiet on the Western Front might be the contender with the most potential to have nominations outside of international film. At least when it comes to below the line categories. We'll see how much people enjoy and embrace this film. It's kind of strange to have Netflix decide to premiere this film at TIFF and not at Venice or Telluride. And not really play that many other festivals, just have it kind of like play in theaters for a bit.
And then drop it the first week of October. Like, what the hell?
It's a bit strange. But from what I hear, this is one of the big surprises of the fall festival circuit. It's a film that seems, to a certain extent, baity, in that it's a historical war film. It's not necessarily easy to watch, but it's got a powerful message, one that people should be able to appreciate and at least, see the importance of the story.
Mm-hmm. Are you going to catch this one in theaters?
If I can, I sure hope so.
Okay. You should make a point of seeing it in theaters. It's fucking incredible. I mean, okay, I would love to see this win. I would absolutely love to see this film win, but I worry that it's not going to happen. Okay, altogether, I think that your top 5 is what the top 5 should be. That's like, if the world was fair, and if the Oscars did what made sense, this is what the top 5 would look like, for sure. You've definitely made that, but as we know, that's not how the international category works. And in past years, stuff that seemed absolutely untouchable, like A Hero, gets left out. So ultimately, is this top 5 the best top 5 you could do right now? Yes. Is this going to be the top 5? Absolutely fucking not.
I would say 3, maybe 4 of these are getting nominated, of the top 5 here. I think it's quite possible that one of the European films and one of the non-European films gets switched out for something else. It might be surprising. It might come,
gradually
in that, like, oh, one of these films isn't shortlisted somehow. You never know. But I think this is the safest, most rational kind of top 5 you can have, I would argue. There's nothing really all too crazy. The only thing that might be missing from this top 5 is a film I actually have in the God tier right above here, and that is EO, baby! The Donkey movie, Donkey Cam, Donkey dream sequences, Donkey vision, strap a camera on a donkey, make a movie, and get it and fucking award. But for real, I'm so excited to see EO. I'm going to be seeing it in about a week. That being said, EO is a bit of a meme within our community. I don't actually think this is getting nominated, even though it looks really good and I kind of wanted to get nominated. What I think EO will actually, where I would rank EO currently, whether you agree with me or not, Matt, would be right here at the top of the C tier.
I think actually do agree.
Yeah, this is going to be a weird film. It's going to be a film that not everybody is going to be on the same wavelength. Right now, if you do count the films that have an A tier and an B tier, you would notice that EO is actually the 15th film from the top, which means that it would be on the short list. Like we're just here thinking like it's a movie from the point of view of a donkey, and we're just like sold. But 90% of Academy voters are going to hear that same concept and be like, I don't want to watch this at all. So, sucks for them, but
yeah. Okay, I mean, something I just noticed is I have a top 15 written out, which actually, if we were to go on and do our categories and say what our awards predictions were, if I were to do my international feature list, my top 15 is exactly the same as your top 15, except I have Plan 75 in instead of One for the Road. But you made some great points about One for the Road, and I do think I would actually put One for the Road in instead of something. Maybe not Plan 75, but maybe Plan 75 or Alcaraz. But yeah, ultimately, I think that I am surprised at how much I agree with your list. I think that you have kind of come up with a very good consensus of what the state of this race is and what we're looking at in the international feature category. So anyone listening out there, you just got a masterclass in what this category is and what to look out for on the horizon this year.
Absolutely. And, don't feel too bad if you picked something like RRR or, Broker in your draft, because these are films that will still manage to garner some points, probably not as much, but still some points in other awards bodies. You just know that they're not going to be as successful at the Oscars is all.
As always, we end this show with some awards predictions. And so I wanted to actually just cut right to the chase and ask you what your best picture lineup is looking like. Because obviously this show has been me and Dylan going back and forth and back and forth and back and forth, and our Oscar predictions kind of haven't changed a whole lot. Like, obviously there's been some shifts in there, but this is the first chance we've got to get a new perspective. And Arnaud, I want to hear what your best picture list is right now.
Okay, so before I get into my top 10, I do have a few quick mentions. I think Bardo and All the Beauty and the Bloodshed have a very small chance of making it into Best Picture. They're both in specialized categories. Bardo probably a little bit more so because of the profile, but I hear great things about All the Beauty and the Bloodshed. Matt, you've been on the record as saying if there's one documentary that makes it into Best Picture, this could be the one. I don't think it'll happen just because documentaries is like a whole nother medium almost. Either way, next I have Glass Onion, which I think, especially now that it's in theaters, still has a chance. But ultimately, I think it's going to be too silly and too kooky, whatever. Not serious enough, not prestigious enough to make it into the top 10. I think Avatar: The Way of Water has a very strong chance. And I just saw the Avatar re-release in theaters, and man, did I forget just how much of a spectacle, how much fun, just how how genuine it all kind of felt. And if this is the same kind of blockbuster with a story of this scale, it really could repeat itself in a lot of ways, even if, the technical accomplishment won't be as novel. Next I have The Whale at number 12. I don't think this is making it to Best Picture, even if Fraser is winning. I think this might be one of the rare cases that we will not have seen in a while where the Best Actor winner does not come with a Best Picture nomination. We will see if that actually happens. But at number 10 and number 11, I have two films that I think are interchangeable. And the reason why is because I think they are both fighting for except for Best Actress, they are fighting for the same nominations. And those are Triangle of Sadness and Tar. Both of these films are fighting for one of the last slots in Best Picture. They're fighting for the last slot in Best Director. They're fighting for the last slot in Original Screenplay. Who will win? I think it's a coin toss. It's a coin toss. Jesus Christ. But right now, I think it's going to be Triangle of Sadness, because ultimately the audience is reacting to it like crazy. It's more accessible. It's a comedy. People are absolutely are talking about the absurd things that happen in the film, whereas Tar is more intellectual. It's talky. It's something that is gonna seduce the artistic side of the Academy, but some people might not be as taken by the film. We have yet to see exactly how that plays out. These two films are just coming out now in limited release. When they will be opening wide is when we'll have a better idea of how these things play out. But if I have to choose between the two, I would say Triangle is number 10. Number 9, I have Empire of Light, because...
What the fuck? Dude.
Because every year there is... See, this is why you have me on, right? To have a differing opinion. I have Empire of Light because every year we have a shitty nomination that is like, why is this here? Why is this here? Whether it's Bohemian Rhapsody, whether it's The Post, whether it's one of these things, and this is gonna be like a film that is just mid all around, but that the right people in the Academy are just falling in love with it for whatever reason, and the package is just too good to pass up on. Number 8, I have Elvis. Dyl would be happy with me right now. You are just I'm seeing your face. You are completely in disbelief.
Jesus,
I don't know if you want to chime in.
Christ.
But
Okay, I'll chime in after you talk about Elvis, but this is chaos.
Elvis is a film I saw very late. I saw it on the National Cinema Day thing that was the first week of September. And when I saw it, I was like, holy shit, I didn't realize how much Oscar bait this was. And I think that ultimately, as contenders seep out more and more, Elvis will just stay there. And Austin Butler is looking potentially at a win right now. And Baz Luhrmann is very, very respected. Even for his mediocre Great Gatsby, he won 1 or 2 Oscars for. This is going to be a top contender. Number 7, I have She Said. We've been hearing great things about this. Okay. This is one of those films that is maybe not going to get too many nominations, but there will be enough word of mouth for this to get into some of the key above the line categories. Notably, it's almost a lock in adapted screenplay because of how weak that category is right now. It's probably going to get at least 1 acting nomination. Maybe something else below the line, and just get its way into picture because of word of mouth. Number 6, I have Banshees of Inisherin. I'm seeing this tomorrow morning. I am excited for it. It's going to be great. This has so much potential above the line, and people are just absolutely loving this. Colin Farrell just won a freaking Volpe Cup. Apparently he's amazing in it. I'm very excited for this. Number 5, I have Top Gun Maverick. You already know why. This is Tom Cruise. Honestly, I have him barely squeezing into Best Actor. I think this is one of those films that people are just, the general audiences are crazy about. It's the big success box office title blockbuster of the year. Nothing else is going to top it. I guess maybe Avatar, but even then, we'll see what happens there. Number 4, I have the Babylon because of the package going on there. It's just Damien Chazelle. Other than when he's really doing something from the heart, He never misses. And then number 3, The Fabelmans. This is the front runner right now. You guys have already talked about this, but this is the front runner right now, and it's going to wear off. It's not going to be the front runner forever. And number 2, I have Everything Everywhere All at Once. I think this is one of those films that might sneak into to the race and surprise a lot of people because there's so much goodwill towards it, because the cast is amazing, because there's so much creativity and the script is so bonkers and original. There's no way this won't be recognized to a significant extent, but it will be too weird to ultimately win the award, which is why the slightly safer but still incredible film, Women Talking, is going to win the Oscar for Best Picture.
Okay, a lot to unpack there. I'm going to be honest, my cat was just going nuts that entire time. So I was listening. And, okay, I mean, your top 5 makes a lot of sense. I think Women Talking is a great choice for number 1 right now. I think Fabelmans obviously is number 3, even though it's really number 1 right now. It's number 3 because we're not looking at what the race is right now. We're looking at what the race is going to be in February. And after that, you've got Babylon, Top Gun, Banshees, all make sense. She Said at number 7 makes sense because, of course, this is an untested film that is, it hasn't premiered yet, and it still could be huge or it could be nothing at all. After that, that's where it gets crazy. At number 8 with Elvis, I mean, if you're going to put Elvis in, you got to put Austin Butler as the acting winner. It's just going to work like that. If Elvis does get that nomination, he's coming for the Oscar. In a way that, like, Colin Farrell with Banshees, yeah, his film's getting nominated. Tom Cruise, like, they're not winning the Oscar, but Elvis could. And if Fraser's film is absent and Elvis is absent, then Fraser still has the edge. But if Elvis is in there, Butler wins. But then at number 9, Empire of Light, I hate that you're right, that this is a total possibility, but I've kept it on my list because, again, we know that critics don't like this film. We know that this is not a film that's connecting well with audiences, but you know who it is connecting well with? Every single old person that I came across at TIFF. Every single old person that I came across at TIFF. There was I would be standing in a rush line and there'd be a 70-year-old woman behind me who would tap me on the shoulder and be like, "What other films have you seen?" "I saw Empire of Light. What a lovely film." That happened twice to me, where just random old women told me that Empire of Light was their favorite movie of the fest. So you could be right. But number 10...
You know what it is we need? There's already the Kids People's Choice Award. We need to get the Old People's Choice Award to get a consensus, what is the old person a film taste this year.
I would not want to see what people got slimed with there. Sponsored by Depends. But yeah, number 10. I'm going to be honest, you're not giving Tar enough credit. Tar has maintained, because I understand that your argument at first was that Tar is going to be too artsy. This is based on the trailer. This is based on the everything around it. But what I feel like you're not giving enough credit to is the fact that it's been seen by wider audiences. It has kept its ridiculously high score. It's still in the mid-90s on Metacritic. It's universally loved, which typically a film that's challenging to the point where it's going to upset Oscar voters or make them kind of push away from it, that's not the type of film that keeps that level of praise. This is clearly appealing to both highbrow and midbrow critics. So I think in that sense, it's so strong. Also, Cate Blanchett has so much goodwill. I really, really think you're underestimating this film. And I think you're overestimating Triangle of Sadness because, for one thing, I mean, right now in your Best Picture lineup, you've got not 1, not 2, but 3 films that have gotten mediocre critic reactions between Elvis, Triangle of Sadness, and Empire of Light. And Triangle of Sadness, of course, something I've been hoping for all year long is that the film would come out in a general release and the reviews would go up. But critics do not like it. And not just that, I have a feeling a lot of audiences probably feel similarly. Actually, I spoke to a lot of people at TIFF who said that Triangle of Sadness was the worst film that they've seen ever at the festival, which I find hard to believe. But at the same time, I don't know. I think you have to look at the reasoning behind why this film is getting those low ratings. And I think that this week it dropping even further on its Metascore was a death sentence to Triangle of Sadness.
It's a film that is inherently, it's going to be inherently divisive with critics. I don't know if it's inherently divisive with audiences. And it's a film that even with that, we've seen critics embrace films with like Metacritic scores in the 50s and the 60s and the Critics' Choice Awards and things like that. This can be that case for that as well. Let me ask you this though, in regards to Tar, because I think we both think that Banshees is getting into Best Picture, is getting a Best Picture nomination. In the last 10 years of the Venice Film Festival competition, only 1 or 2 films maximum from the Venice competition wind up getting a Best Picture nomination each year. Banshees is taking a slot. You have The Whale in. You really think that Tar can be the exception and get 3 films in?
I don't have The Whale in at the moment, actually. I think I have The Whale at number 12 at the moment. Yeah, I don't have The Whale in. I think that film, the love for that film is being massively overestimated.
All right, well, we'll see how the race develops in the next few weeks and whatnot. Maybe I will indeed switch Tar for Triangle of Sadness in the coming days or weeks. But at the moment, I really do think that it is one of those two getting into Best Picture, and they're fighting for some of the same slots. And even if Tar, is kind of seen as an American film because Todd Field is American, it really can be that European film. Because it is very European in style. And yeah, like you said, it's a German co-production. So the setting, some of the actors involved and whatnot are, international in a lot of ways. So it can fill that slot, even if it isn't like as international as the image we might have of that.
Absolutely. I mean, I think truly what that slot is not... it's not a slot for an international director. It's a slot for an auteur. It's a slot for someone who is doing something very artistic, something outside of the norm. And I think that the people who have previously voted people like Ryosuke Hamaguchi in, or Thomas Vinterberg, or Bong Joon-ho, even, or Pavel Pavlikovsky, they will end up liking something along the lines of Todd Field, which, by the way, I just watched Todd Field's first film, In the Bedroom, which blew my fucking mind. What an incredible film. I recommend check it out before you see Tar, because I think that'll give you a little bit more of a sense of like, yeah, Todd Field can make something very interesting that still can exist in that Oscar space. And that's very much, very, very much how I feel about Tar now, is that because when I saw the posters for In the Bedroom, it looked like it was this kind of very typical Oscar bait movie, which is why I've waited so long to watch it. It's actually the second last film in the 21st century nominated for Best Picture that I had not seen, because I just saw the poster and was like, I'm not going to like that movie. It's incredibly artsy, but it doesn't go too far into that to not be accessible, but it has a really nice sensibility to it. Actually, I would say that In the Bedroom feels like the prototype for Manchester by the Sea, if Manchester by the Sea was a better film.
Okay, well, you've definitely sold me on that. I can tell you that, and I definitely want to learn more about Todd Fields and see what kind of work he's done. He seems like a really interesting director for sure, and the whole 16-year hiatus thing makes me even more intrigued to see what he's been up to. But either way, glad I could share these predictions. And by the way, like, if this episode was overwhelming for you because of all these titles, all these countries, all these whatever, one thing I can suggest for learning more about these things is film festivals. Listen, we talk about film festivals a lot. We talk about Cannes, we talk about Berlin, we talk about Venice, TIFF, all these things. These things have passed. They will happen again, of course, but they're not always accessible to the public, and even if they are, they can be expensive. They might not even be in your city. Listen, there are film festivals almost everywhere in the world, in almost every major city in the world, even in minor cities. Look for your local film festivals. You will be surprised to see what they play. And this is the place where you start to meet people who are into international cinema, into cinema in general, and just through the films that the chances you take, through the films you watch, you start to make connections. You start to learn about what kind of films are made into certain countries, what kind of filmmakers are coming out of certain countries, what kind of style are they bringing to the table. So that would be my suggestion. Yes, of course, you can learn about international cinema online too. You can watch some stuff on Netflix. That's all available too, for sure. But right now, it's the fall. There are so many film festivals going on. I'm attending a film festival right now in Montreal, and I'm loving it. I've seen a few films there already. I'm seeing Banshees tomorrow. I'm seeing EO. I'm seeing Women Talking. I'm very excited to be seeing those films early and seeing them soon. Matt, of course, you did TIFF. You did a whole episode on that. We all remember it. So that would be my number one suggestion. Of course, because a lot of these films that we've mentioned, we haven't seen and we're interested in seeing, and they'll be coming out soon. But the first place you can see them is at film festivals. And it might be the only chance for you to see them for another year, maybe more.
Or sometimes
that
ever.
would be... Absolutely. So yeah, that's what I think I want to end on.
Thank you all for tuning into this episode of Fantasy Filmball, and thank you again, Arnaud, for joining us and taking Dylan's spot for a week and being so educational and informative. Next week, Dylan will be back, and we'll be discussing many, many films, including Amsterdam, Tar, and maybe a few other ones. But until then, my name's Matt, and this is Fantasy Filmball.
Thank you for tuning into this episode of Fantasy Filmball with Matt and Dyl. Keep up to date with us on Twitter at @FilmBall. Subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you prefer to listen to podcasts. We even upload a video format of the podcast to YouTube if you want to see our faces. Thank you for listening to this episode of the show, and come back next week.